How effectively do you think that you can identify a high-performing ad? You have a heart, you have a mind, you have an intuition, right? So you should be able to watch an ad, see how you feel, and identify it, correct? My name is Christopher Demetricus. I am a 25-year ad veteran. I'm also a neuroscientist, and my team and I have solved marketing by identifying how customers are created in the human brain. And we help people like you engineer cognitively resonant campaigns and creative strategies to create customers and work with the neuroscience rather than against it. And it is my mission to help you discern marketing fact from marketing fiction through science. So if you're a marketer, then of course you should have an even greater advantage by way of the thousands of hours you have spent honing your craft, comparing that mauve direction against the taupe direction and everything else, and you should be able to pick out an ad. I mean, after all, this is your profession, and this is what you're supposed to be good at. So why don't we take a little test right now? Now keep in mind that what I'm about to show you, these are Manzanita's case studies, and we're just going to do 3. Let's see how you do. One of these, and it doesn't matter what they say, one of these increased click-through rates by 5x over the other one. Which one would you choose? But more important, why? One of these taglines instantly increased sales by 30%. Which one do you think it is? But more importantly, why? Now, one of these raised revenue by 56% in 3 months without a single paid ad. Which one do you think it is? Again, more importantly, why? Before I reveal the answers, let's take a look and see how people did through actual studies. The first one is by a company called Persado. They asked 250 marketers with a minimum of 5 years experience to identify the highest performing ad amongst a group of 3. That included the high performer, a low performer, and then a control ad. What were the results? These experienced marketers chose correctly 33% of the time. Now, those of you versed in statistics realize that in a group of 3, that's basically chance. So that is how marketers did. But what about people who are squarely in the target market, the actual consumers? Wouldn't they be able to tell what's effective because they are the target after all? Well, Emily Falk did a study for the National Cancer Institute, and she took 30 heavy smokers, she put them in an MRI machine and showed them 3 different TV commercials for an anti-smoking campaign. And she asked them to rank those commercials in order of their perceived effectiveness. Now, what was interesting about the results is that they reported the results would be B, A, and C in that order. However, their brains told a totally different story. Their brains said that the order would be C, B, and A. Now, when I say their brains said, it was how their brains responded inside the MRI to these commercials. The brain lit up, and so that indicated resonance. Now, when they ran the actual campaigns, the results were the same as what their brains reported. It was C, B, and A in that order. So even people squarely in the target market weren't able to consciously articulate which ad would be most effective. So what's the takeaway from this? If marketers can't distinguish a dud from a superstar, then what's the point of having creative reviews or even pitches if you can't tell? Think about all those meetings and all those opinions shared. Now, when you took the test yourself, even if you chose correctly all 3 answers, and you don't know why, that's still chance. All of this raises a huge question. Primarily, why? We can think about this in terms of 2 categories, possible versus impossible. Now, if it is possible for people, whether marketers or people in the target market or otherwise, if it is possible for them to discern effectiveness, then that means that we are highly incompetent as marketers. That's not a good sign. However, if it's actually impossible, which these studies seem to indicate, then that would tell us that we're operating with inadequate information. Let's also put this in perspective. Let's say that You are a doctor in a doctor's office, and waiting outside of your office is a room full of kids, and they all report that they have a stomach ache. Your staff went out and asked what's wrong, and so they got the stomach ache problem, and they also asked them which social channels do you prefer and use most, and have you bought anything within the last month, and on and on and on. The typical questions that we ask in marketing. You see what I'm doing here. So then the doctors now, armed with this information, they have to prescribe treatment for an entire group of kids who all report the same thing, but the possibilities are myriad. They could have appendicitis, they could have intestinal issues. It could be a malady of any internal organ that would fall into the category of stomach ache. And then the doctors decide, okay, we're going to get a bunch of bottles of that pink stuff and have them drink that and we should be good. That is really analogous to how the ad industry operates today. That's how messages are created. I've been doing this for a quarter century, as I mentioned, and we take our best guess. We're not stupid, but we are operating with inadequate information. So those doctors, being professional doctors, will see each one of those kids and they will diagnose what's going on internally with those children. And they will discover the source of the pain, and then they will prescribe accordingly. We can now do the same thing in advertising, and we should be doing the same thing in advertising. Okay, I'm going to actually have you take this test again, and I'm going to give you the diagnosis of the audience. But before we do that, we need to understand how customers are created in the brain. I've done other videos on this, so you can actually go have a look at those if you'd like. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly. But it boils down to 4 steps, and I'm going to do this in reverse order. So number 4 is that we must release dopamine. Why? Dopamine is seeking behavior and its desire through one pathway in the brain. Through another pathway, it's action and its motor function. Again, as I've stated, if you put food in front of a rat that has no dopaminergic system in their brain, they will not eat. That's how important dopamine is. We have to release dopamine. Step 3 is that we have to get through the brain's filter. This is called the reticular activation system. And it filters out more than 99.99% of stimuli in your reality. That's a lot. Which means when we're creating an ad, we have a 0.01% chance of actually getting into the brain and triggering dopamine. Do you think you want to leave that to chance or best guess? The second step is that we need to create resonance. Resonance is the alignment with the psychological traits of an individual. That's resonance. The best way to illustrate resonance is the cocktail party effect. Someone shouts your name from across the room at a cocktail party. You didn't hear any of the conversations around you, but you heard that because your name is highly resonant with you. Imagine giving that same power to your messaging in your ad campaigns. Now we can do this. So step 1 is that we have to measure the psychological traits of the audience. And that's what we do. This is our product. It's called 𝐷𝐶𝐶, which stands for psychometric communications. We are able to read from data out there on the web, out there in social, and through other means. We can read the psychological traits of large groups of audience, thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people. And then we will group these people into clusters that have the same or similar psychological traits. That's targeting. And that is how targeting should be done. Why? Because it is these traits that lead to decision or the dopamine release. So once we have those traits, we can engineer resonant messaging. We can then get that message through the RAS, the brain's filter, and that will trigger a dopamine release which creates a customer. And this is how it has happened since the dawn of Homo sapiens. Now we are able to work with the neuroscience rather than against it. Okay, let's take the test again. But now I'm going to arm you with the diagnosis. When we analyzed the audience of this particular client, we got 7 clusters, and the agency that we worked with chose one. It was an apples to apples comparison, and they chose curiosity. I informed them that there are 2 ways to trigger curiosity. The first is incongruent information. The second is an information gap. Now, which one would you choose? Next, Again, we were working behind an agency for this. We analyzed the audience and we got a strong read on something called regulatory focus. Regulatory focus has valence, which is this way or that way. There are two types. The first type is called promotion focused, and these people essentially pursue a goal like anybody would pursue a goal. They take steps, reach the goal. But the other kind, they are called prevention focused, and they are focused on the prevention of failure. That's what they care about most. Now, which one would you choose? And finally, the whiskey case. We analyzed the audience and we got a very strong read on a very basic trait, which is the spectrum of introversion, extroversion. And we got that strong read on introverts. We found out that more than half of the audience, they're introverts. And so which one would you choose now? Do you see the difference that understanding the traits of the audience makes when you are engineering messaging for your campaign? We have two ways of analyzing the audience. We have phase one and we have phase two. Phase one, we go out into the web and social channels and we are able to analyze the language that people use and extract the psychological traits from those people. We use a pretty massive set of keywords in order to find these people. That creates a sample, right? Our technology platform connected to AI will analyze and extract these traits, and it produces the clusters, which represent a blueprint on how you can engineer resonant messaging that gets through the brain, triggers dopamine and decision, creating a customer. The second way we do this, which is phase two, is that we will use an assessment for your customer database if you happen to have one. If you don't, we can use phase one, build one, and then we can execute phase two. Now, phase two is quite interesting because we are able to find the heaviest users within your customer database. This is important because if you know the profiles of the heaviest users, think the gaming industry, 1% of 1% who buy everything in the game. These are the heavy users. When you profile this particular group, then you can build that group with a minimum of effort and resources and experience the most rapid revenue growth. So as you can imagine, incorporating 𝐷𝐶𝐶 into your marketing will drastically reduce costs in a number of areas. You can reduce the platforms that you're paying for. You can reduce the third-party data that you might be paying for. And for those very ambitious companies, you might even be able to reduce the personnel that you have. And of course, traditional consumer research becomes less and less necessary the more that you use this. Another benefit is that you can target your total addressable market. These clusters that you get from the output from our platform represent the TAM. It's not some tiny sliver of opinion-based, very narrowly defined target, which is common in the industry. You can now target the total addressable market simultaneously through a single integrated campaign. And lastly, I hear this a lot from our agency partners, is that through the old intuition-based method, they have difficulty telling a story to the clients, or to, if it's the case of a client, to the bosses, selling the story, right? You see people all the time, you need to build a story around your idea. Goodby and Silverstein were talking about this in a video that I saw recently. You need to build a story around your idea. Well, in my experience, that story isn't always true. But in this case, using 𝐷𝐶𝐶, you know exactly what to say, and you know it's 100% true. And you know it's unimpeachable. And there's no debate. Here's the reason for the idea. It's because our audience are driven by achievement. Period, the end. Some of you might be thinking, well, we can just use AI. AI cannot do what 𝐷𝐶𝐶 can do, at least not yet, unless we tell it. So essentially how we work with AI is that our platform conducts the analysis, and then it expertly prompts OpenAI to give us the imagery and the copy examples for our output so that you can see an absolutely perfect brief. Here are several images of what you should create. Here are copy examples of what you should say, and in each case, they are resonant with that particular cluster. Once again, we empower marketers all over the world to create cognitively resonant, strategic, creative campaigns. And if you're ready to 2x your marketing efforts immediately, we'd be happy to have a conversation with you. Thanks so much.